What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And today we're taking a look at Extinction. It's out April 10th for the Xbox, the PC, and PS4. Now, this is the third-party action game from Modus Games and Iron Galaxy. Extinction has you leaping around lively-looking landscapes, hacking the heads off giant enemy attackers. And, of course, there's a story in there somewhere as well. But does that sound a little bit familiar? Well, it probably should, because Attack on Titan 1 and 2 are built on the same premise, which is using slingshots and giant man-beasts to monkey bar your way across the game level like a boss rush decapitation title. But here you remove the creepy big-headed humans and replace them with orcs that wear different types of armor that require different strategies to defeat. Let's see how it did, shall we? As always, if you liked the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Extinction. Look, ma, no heads, the life and times of an orc inferior, and what's left in a game when you remove big, hairy, naked men. Graphics start first. Extinction has a very cartoony look, almost a cross between, say, Fortnite and World of Warcraft, and I really do enjoy the way it looks. Almost nothing gets lost in the picture with well-defined and saturated colors and designs overall, and they're big and bold and brutish, and you can see that. The first time you see one of these rampaging Ravini, which are the giants, moonwalk through your homeland with a giant padlock mask on his face and bracers on his ankles made out of fiery brambles, you're probably going to say to yourself, okay, most likely I'm only going to see that one time in my entire life. And I love the way the sense of scale feels in the game. Each one of these creatures teleports into your region with a massive roar, and running or flying up to them to see what you're going to end up facing is probably one of the better elements of the game, along with your attacks, regardless of the fact that they're not that many. When you're slingshotting from building to building and then drop into a jackal group and start wailing away, I really did like a lot of the animation. It's a somewhat low-gravity affair, though, that we've become accustomed to, I think, in over-the-top games like this, with air uppercuts with swords followed by 720 tumbles, all drawn really well. Of course, these guys are giants. You have a sword, and your job is to kill them before they level the entire planet. And that brings us, of course, to the destruction in the game. One of the first things you're going to notice is when a building gets flattened by Ravini, it's almost got this ripping look, and it's less like the constructed blocks we've seen in other games, where everything looks like it was created in a Lego software suite before being imported into the game engine. While certainly an artist's choice, I actually thought it was well done here. But while I liked the destruction, there were other elements I didn't. For example, I'm not a big fan of the normal enemies' designs. Now, I really dig some of the Ravini, who apparently shop at Van Cleef & Arpels, showing up as fantasy creatures that look like someone took a friggin' bedazzler to them before sending them out to attack you. The real issue here, though, is that there's little variation in everything, the normal enemies and the big ones. Even the locations, the cities, the deserts, the small towns, the landscapes of all types have this generic random creation feel to them that you can see right away, which of course isn't that surprising because that is actually what's occurring here. But in a bid to make the movement through the game world fast and seamless, the locations are left looking like someone placed a bunch of card houses on a Warhammer 40,000 desert table mat and called it good. There's nothing to really solidify the locations as places that people live in. In fact, there's a couple boxes and a couple empty stalls here and there and some trees, but it really does hurt the atmosphere when they try to tell you that this is important for you to save these people who've lived here for thousands of years, and you show up and it looks like a bunch of temporary housing. Also, in a game like this with fluid movement and giant enemies, you're going to want that camera to be excellent, and here it has some serious issues. Countless were the number of times I lost myself in a Ravini's arms and legs with the camera flipping and flopping around and hoping desperately to see a bright red icon somewhere that indicated something nearby was susceptible to my special attack before I was unceremoniously jettisoned out of the giant's body and flung back to the ground. It's incredibly odd, and it's almost like collision detection isn't on in some places. It was really bothersome. And of course, a game like this, performance is going to be paramount for your enjoyment, and on a PC with a current i5 or even last-gen i5 and a 980, you can easily see 60 FPS with all the settings at Ultra. The game runs incredibly well, and on the PC, I never saw a hint of any real actual issues there. Now, when it comes to the console, take this into account if you're buying. The game actually runs at 30 FPS regardless of the resolution. I was a little bit surprised by this and actually thought that maybe there was a problem with the system. If there is, or some kind of patch comes out, I'll certainly put it in the comments. But so far, you should probably watch for that. As a complete package graphically, Extinction runs well, and the Ravini themselves, I would say, are really interesting, but the drab locations and overall middling middlemen makes the game feel like it never does anything to really elevate itself. Sound, music, and voice.
Sentinel! Dust yourself off and get back in there!
King Yarrow, we may have to adjust our objective in this conflict. Delorum may be lost.
Truly impressive work, Sentinel.
And you know what? Let's do music first. Look, someone found their digital drum kit, but all joking aside, it is actually really percussion heavy. When it does branch out on its own, it never really does anything new. It sort of just fills the air with generic thunderous horse riding hero music that makes everyone look at the nearest hill and expect to see Conan riding in. It's not bad, it's just incredibly bland. It's there, it's fantasy inspired, but it doesn't do anything, just like the graphics, to push it above and beyond. And of course, that brings us to sound. This might be an acquired taste, but for me, I love the fact that when you attack, the sword sings out this awesome, slightly discordant whistle that does a really good job to set it sonically above many other titles that we receive, where it seems like some recording Foley artist yells whoosh into the camera and they call it good. Not so good are the impact sounds. They're discernible, but in many ways are a bit muddy, especially when you're taking on the jackals and you're trying to build up your blade's power, or just because it's fun. When you take the sword and you swing that, you have the impact sound, and then you also have the enemies reacting to every hit. I love those different elements. It's a great thing to have, but they don't seem as if they're separated enough in the sound spectrum, so they all overlap one another at different times. Now, that being said, I did love the giants smashing the holy hell out of some podunk village's town square. As a world explodes around you and the roof you're standing on is now separate shards of splintering wood and you fall to the ground, there's a number of cool little effects that you're going to actually be able to hear there. When you use your special blade attack, that also slows down time and you can hear some different processing. Also, the first time a giant swings at you with an arm the size of a damn Amtrak engine and this heavy thundering mix of wind and atoms that are trying to get out of the way is played, it is really awesome. Sometimes we just don't get games that know how to handle their sonic presence, where massive constructions don't have the sounds we would associate with them. For the most part, Extinction does, but unfortunately, it is really held down sometimes by the muddy presentation. And of course, after sound comes voice, and I have to say this, it does its utmost to make everything about as palatable as it can possibly be. It's like a breakfast cereal entering into the world of Frosted Flakes and Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and it wants to blend in, so it calls itself sugary things. And unfortunately, that's how the voice here sounds through and through. It's not bad, it's recorded well, but where voice is usually there to the very least elevate the presentation of information or emotion in a title, Extinction hits like verbal Paxil. One dude says something, then a chick, then a dude, then a bro, then a gal. It just bounces around, and it leads up to points where you never really get a grip on the emotion of a character because, well, frankly, it didn't appear like they had any. Gameplay, and a bit about the story. You play as the Sentinel, one of the world's last capable heroes who can take on the enemies known as the Ravini, who are basically all the orcs from World of Warcraft yoked to the gills and rolling around in human growth formula. The setup is simple. They attack locations, you show up at the locations and try to kill them. Much of the title's gameplay loop is built around you running around killing enemies or saving civilians, and the power on your rune sword growing until you're basically able to strike the killing blow against the Ravini. Now, against the jackals, the game allows for the use of subtle combos hidden in delays of the attack button. Not exactly new, but it's a welcome addition instead of finding out that there were no combos or something else delightfully disappointing like that. Unfortunately, they lack variation. Oh sure, you can turn your generic sword strike into a scimitar uppercut, airlifting an enemy like a friggin' rescue chopper into the air to continue the attack, and a few other different things, but it never feels robust. Engaging, even with normal jackals, 2 flying enemies, and one particular breed I just like to simply call TRB or those red bastards, it still doesn't feel that involved. Disappointingly, if you're not doing that, there's only really one other thing you can do, which is save civilians who are Star Trek ready, hanging out at crystal teleporters randomly spread across the game maps. You just go to the location highlighted on the map, you take out any normal enemies, and send the humans on their way. Or you can be like me and just send the humans on their way and ignore that the enemies are attacking everybody. Either one works. But regardless if you killed the normal enemies, if you saved some people, you can now take on the Ravini once your rune sword has enough power. You might wonder to yourself, why is he talking about the giants last? They seem to be a major part of the game, and I can't lie. When I saw 3 spawn in and you're trying your damnedest to take him down, flitting between one so you can cut his leg off, then jetting off the other to decapitate him, and then jetting to another to keep him busy as the last civilians are only feet away, those moments can be awesome. The thing is, that awesomeness is doled out in some of the smallest of servings I've ever seen. This is the thing. The giants are not boss battles like you may expect. I absolutely love the idea of mini Shadow of the Colossi thunderfooting it through the last remnants of civilization. Like they think that smashing it flat is the same as buying the Holmes title, but they aren't. Sure, they have different armors, some can't be destroyed, others can, but since you're half Spider-Man anyway, you just crawl up most of them, and there's some weakness of some kind they all have. Also, you can't attack them normally at all. Swinging your normal sword attack at a giant's toe is as ineffective as it sounds. You have to follow the very 1, 2, 3 structure to take them out each time. And what that does is it culminates in a feeling of a game with three distinct parts: the saving of the civilians, the attacking of the normal creatures, or the attacking of the major creatures themselves, the Ravini. With a lot of games, there'd be a blending of those elements into one cohesive whole, and unfortunately that doesn't really happen here. And the issue isn't that Extinction couldn't have nailed it. It could. It has the requisites to do something interesting. It's that somehow they made a game that you have the ability to whip fling your sword-carrying wonderkin across an entire city and straight into a giant's face. Boring. Also, the location of the waypoints in particular is so damn random. I mean, random's one thing actually, but Christ, sometimes these things appear in places with location bugs or on the tippy top of a tower. Let's not forget there's literally no way for the people to have got to those places. It's when the expected game loop takes over for game design without a great deal of environmental or narrative inclusion that a game world starts to feel false, especially in a title like this where they start out with a big story and try to sell it to you. Extinction hits that roadblock many times, and it's noticeable even more here because not much else in the game lifts it up and helps mitigate the issues. And those problems continue when it comes to the skills. Welcome to Generic McGeneric Man's home of the average. Exciting skills like +10 to health or -10 to slowdown effect await you, and Extinction does very little with what really could be some profoundly interesting premises in the skills. A lot of games here mire themselves in the minutiae of numbers and percentages and ranges, but they marry that hand in hand with narrative that can work well to describe the difference between, let's say, Aragorn or Boromir in a sword fight. But without that, it's a bland numbers game, and that's what we have in Extinction. I also like the fact that some skills were hidden and got unlocked as you played the game, but overall, it's an incredible opportunity spoiled. Lastly, let's talk a little bit about the different modes. There's Extinction Mode, which is basically a non-responding Ravini battle. You leap into a random location and take out enemies until you die. There's also a Skirmish Mode, which is a bit more like the campaign's side missions that give you a random seed number you can give to friends, and it keeps track of the various locations, setups, and Ravini armor patterns so friends can try their hand at it. Lastly, you have daily challenges, but let's talk about challenge for a second, because one of the problems is in the campaign mode, when dying, nothing actually happens. You just respawn after a bit, and sure, if there's a timer, you're going to lose a little time, or maybe a civilian dies. But in the scheme of things, it is almost not noticeable because many times I would win a level with an incredible amount of time left. Extinction's an odd title overall. There's no huge amount of depth or creativity to it. While it looks like each battle with the Ravini is going to be this epic fight to the last, it's really just hitting the same joints over and over and over again. And while Attack on Titan escaped this trap for the most part with a connection to its fiction and a couple other systems working out, Extinction is less developed, and you're left thinking, man, you'd assume for a race that's basically taken over the world that they would figure out not to wear wooden foot bracelets to the ankle-biting parties. But they don't. And of course, that brings us to fun factor. This was fun for a short amount of time, but then it really wore out its welcome. I like the idea of loss. I love the idea of little bits of success taken from the jaws of failure, and that being the story. Those can be great, but here the repetitive nature, the shallow combat, and the generic fiction and lack of real customization leaves a gamer thinking, why? Why go on? The combat repetitiveness isn't saved by the couple combos that you have, nor the few skills you can augment with later. And speaking of skills, I found some incredibly strange way the skills work. For example, you can max out your health, but the giants can still one-shot you. Now, I'm not firmly against that. I think it sort of makes sense. You just got smashed by a logging truck-sized arm. The chances of you walking away, even if you're wearing your best Witcher 3 cosplay outfit, is pretty friggin' low. But nothing in the game world that isn't the giants really makes any difference when it comes to your health. They really don't hit you that hard. It's certainly not the normal enemies, so in the end, that feels like it doesn't make a lot of sense to even have. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system, with rent being replaced by deep sale for PC, and that is what this is, a deep sale. If you could find the game for maybe 5 or 10, it might make more sense, but right now there isn't just a lot actually occurring within the title, and there certainly isn't enough gameplay there to cause a person to want to go back and back to do those daily challenges, or really play the other modes. So that's it for me. I hope you liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Remember, you can check out Twitter, or you can become a patron on the Patreon website, which allows me to continue to give you guys reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap, and it's where I buy every single game for review, regardless if I got a code from the developer or not. But last but not least, and in fact probably the most important, is our community. When you end up becoming a patron, you can jump into the Discord where you can decide if you want to play games with other patrons, if you want to talk about board games, do Dungeons and Dragons, what have you. There are a large number of activities you can join in the Discord. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.